Thank you very much, Mr. Azzuddin, and welcome all the guests to our webinar titled New Discoveries of the Lost City of al-Qata'i. Again, I welcome you all, and I would like to start by introducing our speaker, Professor Tarek Swelim. It's really nice to have this opportunity to introduce a close friend and a colleague from the college, and we have been working together for now almost 9 years, and it's been a privilege working with Professor Swelim, teaching our students and as well as having our research done together. Dr. Swelim is an associate professor of Islamic art and architecture at the College of Islamic Studies, as well as he's coordinating the master's program. This master program is a 2-year program where we are privileged with a good group of students that are spending 2 years with us, and they have been working on either art, Islamic art and its display, or Islamic architecture from a historical and a contemporary perspective as well. Dr. Swelim is a Harvard graduate in 1994, and he has also obtained his master's from the American University in Cairo, and he's been working on areas of Islamic art, Islamic art objects, as well as in Egyptology. He has also taught in the American University in Cairo and conducted several, I would say, professional courses, certificates at Stanford University, at Oxford University in England. We are very privileged to have Professor Swelim with us. Scholarly, he has been working a lot on Ibn Tulun Mosque, and I can tell you that it would be a great journey today looking at the area surrounding this magnificent mosque. He has been researching this significant building for the last, I would say, 15 years, correct? Even more, I guess. I don't want to make you a bit younger. Yes, but I would like to keep it this way, 15 years. And he's also been working on the architecture of the Mamluk period, and hopefully, inshallah, we will be having his new publication on the Mamluk, the decorative lintels of Mamluk Cairo. I don't want to take too much of your time, and please, if you have any questions, again, as Mr. Az pointed out, add them to the chat to all panelists, and I will take record of all of these questions and state them and address them to the Professor Swelim, and if we can help as well from our side. Professor Swelim, thank you very much for this great opportunity, and best of luck. And I will be listening to the lecture, of course, and trying to support if needed.
Thank you, Dr. Remah. Thank you, Mr. And thank you. It's a great pleasure always to give a lecture. It makes one alive and all what comes with it. I welcome you all from my office in Cairo, and this is the second time I give my lecture via the College of Islamic Studies at Ahmad Ibn Tulun. And it's a great subject. Dr. Remah was very kind to give us 15 years of working on Ibn Tulun. Actually, started in 1989 until now. It was published like 6 years ago, but it's still working in the mind, and alhamdulillah, there is lots to be still done about it. Having said that, share my screen, and I talk to you about tonight. So this is the first slide. I would like to start this lecture by paying a tribute to some professors who taught me a great deal. Whom without them I would not be a professor. I would like to introduce to is my professor at the American University in Cairo, the late Professor George Scanlon, taught me how to look at things and how to make things right, and taught me a great deal of approaches that I would have never been able to do before his teaching. I also pay great tribute to Professor Oleg Grabar, my advisor at Harvard, who taught me how to interpret Islamic art in general, and also he taught me how to use imagination in interpreting things and circumstances and situations. The third person I would like to pay tribute to is Professor William Mcdonald. Professor William Mcdonald, I attended a course with him at Harvard, and he gave me a course on the legacy of Roman architecture. In that course, I was introduced to Roman architecture, and I was fascinated by it ever since until today. And I'm going to use some of his work tonight. So to these people, I bless their souls, and I think it's always nice to remember your mentors, tutors, and great people who taught me a lot of things. So this is homage to the three men. Al-Qata'i is a city that was built by Ahmad Ibn Tulun since he came to Egypt in the 9th century. I'm not going to bore you with dates, and I'm not going to bore you with names, because it can be a little complicated. Anyway, Ibn Tulun was appointed as a wali, a governor of Egypt in the 9th century, and he had different fights, different problems when he came to Egypt. He found that Egypt was kind of a mess. He found that best thing to do is to get everybody he didn't want. First people he got rid of were the finances people. The second people he got rid of were the mailmen. By this, he managed to control affairs by being in charge of the finances of Egypt, and then being in control of all the information that he wanted the guys in Baghdad, the capital, to. And by that, he could control some of his spies everywhere. During the course, he managed to make Egypt an independent country for the first time ever since the time of the Ptolemies. And so the Ptolemies were 3rd century BC, until by Alexander the Great, and then until 30 BC. After that, we had a period, and then the Byzantine period, and these are periods when Egypt was part of a great empire, the Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire, and after that, the Islamic Empire. With Ibn Tulun coming to Egypt, he wanted to make Egypt into something great, and he managed to do so by playing games with the Abbasids. He told him that he found a treasure in the desert. This treasure he was going to build a great city for Egypt. This city was the 3rd capital for Islamic Egypt, and the city was going to be called al-Qata'i, which means wards, quarters, allotments, but things that are segmented. Ibn Tulun managed to do so, and it became a great period for luxurious, splendid buildings that he built. So why don't we hear anything about al-Qata'i today? Because it's no longer there. Al-Qata'i was a city so great in its splendor that it started to compete with the great city where Ibn Tulun came from, and that was the city of Samarra. Was the great intellectual city of the Abbasid Caliphate. It is the city that was intellectual, cultural, and it was a great city to live in. Ibn Tulun was brought up in Samarra. Samarra, for your understanding, was New York of our time. It was the place to be. It had the best education, it had the best buildings, the best villas, it had the entertainment was absolutely fantastic, and this is where Ibn Tulun sprang out from. And when he came to Egypt, he decided that he wanted to build a Samarra of his own that was called al-Qata'i, and he managed to do that. Why don't we hear anything of it today? Because it was destroyed. So, when was it destroyed? I'll just tell you in a moment. So, this is a map that shows you the area on the south. It is Fustat, and the first capital of Egypt, al-Askar, the second Islamic capital of Egypt, and then the third is al-Qata'i. After that, the 10th century, rectangle you see up there. It was destroyed by the Abbasids, who were so and they simply decided to destroy it by one of their great generals, great but famous generals called Sulaiman al-Katib. In the year 905 AD, the city of al-Qata'i was destroyed, and the historians tell us that the palaces of Ibn Tulun were plowed, hurisat, from their foundations in order to not to leave any trace of al-Qata'i in Egypt forever. The only thing that they left was, of course, the great mosque of Ibn Tulun that survives today, and a couple of buildings that we talk about. This destruction of al-Qata'i is equivalent to something like the great destruction of the city of Baghdad by the Mongols in the 13th century, and even more so by the destruction of the city of Halab by Timur Lane in the early 15th century. And when Timur Lane started to build pyramids of skulls of the people that he was massacring, and that was in the city of al-Qata'i, though we don't have records of building pyramids of skulls in al-Qata'i. About historical records that are given by the historians, the contemporary historians of the time. Balawi was the first one, and even some earlier. The historians were copying from each other. So the only surviving records are, the earliest was al-Balawi in the 10th century, early 10th century. We have his document. And then this was copied by Ibn Duqmaq and the greatest of all, Taqi ad-Din al-Maqrizi, who was the greatest topographer of Islamic Cairo in the 14th and early 15th century. Copying. So the same information is being copied, and it was always there. Some of these historians give credit to Balawi, some of them don't. And Maqrizi was very clever in not giving credit to the historians that he was copying from, but that's another story to talk about later. So it was well described. The description of Maqrizi and Ibn Duqmaq and Balawi, one can visualize, start to imagine how these buildings would have looked like and where they would have been located within the modern city of Cairo today. Al-Qata'i was studied earlier by Georges Salmon in 1902, and he presented this map that you see in front of you. The map is kind of disturbing because he adds on the map not only the Tulunid building that he thinks were in these places, some of them are correct, some of them were not, but he added the citadel of Cairo, which is Ayyubid. He added the Fatimid city of Cairo, okay, part of the Fatimid city and buildings, and then the Mamluk as well. And when you look at it, it is a little disturbing. North is to the left, and the city of al-Qata'i would have been in that area. According to al-Maqrizi, the city of al-Qata'i was in the area what's called Qaramidan, which is in the area on the right side. If you're looking at Sultan Hassan, the mosque of Sultan Hassan is, if it's behind you, then the Qaramidan would have been on the right side, meaning that if you look at Sultan Hassan in front of the citadel, then that long area would have been the Qaramidan. And so we know that the palace was somewhere on the slope of the citadel, and then there was the big Midan below it, and then the city extended to the Mosque of Ibn Tulun, as we can see here. Anyway, the city was then studied in a book that was published in 2015. And looking at it today, over the last year, things were kind of not accurate and needed some adjustments, and therefore it had to be revisited. And this is where we came up with new, maybe interesting ideas that we can use in the future. This was the view of the city that was imagined from a pavilion that was on top of where the citadel of Cairo is now located, where there is the panoramic terrace, where tourists usually go and see the view of Cairo. Somewhere around there, a little lower than that, okay, was this nice pavilion called Qubbat al-Hawa, where Ibn Tulun used to go and enjoy the view of Cairo. It was a great view, okay. It had the agriculture, the palaces, the city, the allotments, and all of that. It had agricultural land. It had the Nile. It had the opposite side of the Nile. It had the pyramids on the opposite side. So it was quite interesting. The palace would have been somewhere down below, and this was an imaginary view of the city of al-Qata'i that I gave my friend Jaroslav Dobrovolsky, Jarek Dobrovolsky, who kind of ingeniously made the drawings according to the concepts that we were discussing for long periods of time. The earlier drawing was done by Saif Rashidi, and this is now a development of the latter. When you have an aerial view of the city of Cairo, satellite aerial view of the city of Cairo, looking north, we have these two circles. These two circles, the one on the bottom is where the Mosque of Amr ibn al-As is located, therefore it's Old Cairo, Fustat area. The one above is the Mosque of Ibn Tulun, and therefore it's the area of al-Qata'i. According to that, we develop it into a drawing, and the drawing would show where al-Fustat was, where Old Cairo is, and then the area of al-Askar, and then northeast of it would have been al-Qata'i, where the Mosque of Ibn Tulun is located right in front of the citadel of Cairo. But then we have this long wall that you see on the right side. That was a wall, that was a great aqueduct that Ibn Tulun decided to build first. Aqueduct was a very important building because the aqueduct, this is getting closer now, the aqueduct does what? The aqueduct provides water for the city. Without water, live. Before that, in Fustat, there were using water was transported manually. There were pipes, of course, for water, but with the aqueduct, then you have a good supply for water for the number of people that were coming with Ibn Tulun after his wars against the Abbasids. And Ibn Tulun found that once he found that the retinue of slaves and his army was reaching 100,000 people, he decided to build that city. Aqueduct, and then next to the aqueduct was another building. But anyway, part of the aqueduct still survives today. Well, this is, we can see the city of al-Qata'i, we have the palace of al-Maidan, and then we have the rest of the city of al-Qata'i presented in another revisited view, and other buildings that we're going to talk about. Like here, we have the remains of the aqueduct of Ibn Tulun in the area of Basatin. In an area today, south of Basatin, it is an area called Bir Sultan. And this is where the Ma'khaz was located from a lake called Bitash. From there up, and then it would go south or north to the city, and this is the remains of the aqueduct today. One of the greatest achievements of the 9th century was building an aqueduct. It was not the first aqueduct to be built in Cairo, I mean in the Islamic city, because earlier we find the area of Stabla Antar, the scholar archaeologist Gharib managed to find earlier aqueducts on a much, much smaller scale, but nothing like big as that. Of course, the next aqueduct that was built was that of Salah ad-Din, that was restored, rebuilt after that by the Mamluks along the al-Khalij and then Salah Salim road that some of you know if you've come to Egypt, and if you're in Egypt. This is not that one, so it's another one altogether. Another view of the city of al-Qata'i, showing you the Nile, Birkat al-Fil, and then Birkat Qarun, and then have Qubbat al-Hawa that I just mentioned earlier, the cemetery, the palace, and then we had Bimaristan that you can see on the lower left. Bimaristan was a hospital, and this hospital was also funded by a treasure that Ibn Tulun told the Khalifa that he has found and he had discovered. And the treasure is a very interesting story, not how it was found, but the treasure idea was probably he found an ancient Egyptian tomb, or two ancient Egyptian tombs where from old gold he could melt, and then he could make Egypt very, very rich. Or maybe more tombs that he discovered and melted the gold and made Egypt a very, very rich and independent country at the same time. Why would you have a Bimaristan, a hospital? It was for curing people. And it had a certain very interesting systematic arrangement where it had a place for men, a place for women. Everyone had a certain time of day to enter, and they were treated very well. They had very good physicians, and it goes on and on in the nice stories. All Qata'i and Ibn Tulun have lots of interesting stories, but there's no time to tell all these stories and interpret them. But one of the interesting things about the Bimaristan of al-Qata'i is that you were not allowed to leave the hospital unless you were able to eat a full loaf of bread. I mean, not the loaf of bread of today, or the loaf of bread, big loaf of bread of their time. Okay, eat it, as well as you can eat a full chicken. If you can eat the full chicken and a full loaf of bread, then you can be exited from the hospital, the Bimaristan, all free. Remember that there were very few Bimaristans in the Islamic world. I mean, we can count them maybe on our fingers. I don't know how many. I don't know many, but I know there were other bimaristans built later and not maristans that were built earlier. Let's say they were like 10 old. This is another city altogether. And to have a city with a bimaristan, of course, shows ultimate degree of culture and civilization because you're caring for the people. So you have a civic project, which is the aqueduct, another civic project, which is the bimaristan. Then we had the palace. The palace was called al-Maidan. This is according to Maqrizi and Balawi. And from what one understands is that the al-Maidan, today it's called al-Maidan, is a square. It wasn't a square, it was an open parade area, but it had a palace next to it. So al-Maidan was actually a double entity area. One was the palace, the second was the mal'ab, which is an open parade ground. Interesting. How did these look? We know where they were, but how did they look? It's difficult to know. But we know Ibn Tulun came from Samarra. Samarra was that in place to live. In Samarra, of course, there were palaces. These palaces were great, like the palace of al-Qata'i. And this Jawsak al-Qata'i and the palace of Bulquara and others. I mean, you generalize how they looked. This is a reconstruction, a redrawing that was done by Alistair Northridge, which is the high authority on the field in Samarra. But according to Ettinghausen and Grabar, they say, these are large, huge walled compounds with endless succession of apartments, rooms, courts, halls, and passageways whose functions were unknown. It was a city within a city. It's a palace with the size of a city. Then the entrance would lead to usually there's a huge entrance that would lead to a corridor, vestibule, that then would lead to halls, domed halls with 4 iwans, and each one would lead to other 4 iwans, etc. And it was kind of it had a splendor of its own. And it was a secluded world altogether. Very hard to know what was really going on. But from Samarra, one can visualize that the palace of Ibn Tulun would have looked like that. But how exactly is not known. This is the Dar al-Khalifa, this is the palace of Bulquara. I don't want to go into details, but you can see the corridors, the halls, the rooms, the succession of corridors, which is very, very fine and shows the grandeur. Palaces were all decorated with wonderful stucco that we know, the stucco of Samarra. And then we have scenes like this. Shows us what the girls dancing. They are pouring some drink in bowls, and they're dancing, and they're wearing very fine clothes, costumes. They have nice wigs or hair that's braided. They're wearing pearl earrings, nice makeup, and all of that. And probably a basket full of fruits or something at the bottom, which shows the kind of life that's interesting. From the Qubbat al-Hawa, we had lower the slope of the citadel of what is today the citadel. We had this new drawing of the throne halls of the palace of Ibn Tulun. The original Maidan was located somewhere below the citadel, which I just said, and that's the site of the Qara Maidan, which is an open space. However, its exact size are not known. Yani, this is according to Maqrizi, saying that the Maidan was somewhere there. Back to the maps, historical maps, and the oldest historical map that we have is the map of the Description d'Egypte, which was the map done by Bonaparte's expedition that came in 1798 and left Egypt in 1801. During that time, the French who came with Bonaparte, great scholars, came and recorded Egypt in a way that no other country was as well recorded as such. The geography, the people, the history, the flora, the fauna of Egypt was extremely well recorded. No other country in the world was recorded as well. It was compiled by these wonderful savants who were the experts in their fields and produced the fantastic work known as the Description de l'Egypte. And this is a detail of the map of Cairo. Detail of the map of Cairo looking north. And if we look carefully, we find the citadel area would have been on the right side. Which is right in front of the Mosque of Sultan Hassan and Rifai, is on top in that square, or today known as Maidan Salah ad-Din. And then the oblong shape was the Qara Maidan, which was developed later and called the Qara Maidan. Probably this was the Maidan, the area of the Maidan of al-Qata'i, and then we have the city of al-Qata'i on the left side, as we can see. The measurements of the city of Maidan, area of Sultan Hassan, from Maidan Rumayla until the south, where it ends near the shrine of Sayyida Nafisa, I'm sorry, Sayyida Aisha. This area would have been somewhere between 600 and 650 meters north-south by 160 to 170 meters wide. The Maidan was a wonderful place. It was the place where people would go and enjoy polo games. It was the place where they would go on race courses, race horseback riding, chariots. It was also a battlefield. They can go and train. They can also go and do all sorts of sports, and everybody would go and they would show off their strength. They can shoot with their bows and arrows, aiming, showing their training or the strength. It's a place of entertainment and show off. Plus, it was the place where everybody would go and meet, to an extent that if anybody was going anywhere, they'd go, where are you going? Where are you going? Well, they'd say simply, I'm going to, of course, I'm going to Al Maidan, because that's the place where people would go. It was the hub of the society of al-Qata'i. And remember, Egypt never had anything like this before, ever since the time of the Ptolemies, not the Romans, but the Ptolemies. Anyway, it is, so it was a great place of entertainment and the hub of the society. The Maidan was, so they were playing polo. This is a painting of Al Maidan. It's just to give you the impression, the idea that it's the place where horse chariots were, racing chariots took place. And the best example to visualize this is the movie Ben-Hur, Charlton Heston, one of the greatest scenes, long scene of just going on the chariot and all the horses and the strength. And then, of course, not the new Ben-Hur, no, the old one, 1959. That's what I'm talking about. No, the new one is kind of, but the Ben-Hur is probably the best for such a scene. But what's the most exciting part of the race? It is here, where everybody now is waiting for that moment in the Midan, where the chariot is going to break down, the horses are going to go, I don't know what, going to fly in the air, and the guy, the driver, is in difficulty, and probably if it's hurt, then there's blood. And in Roman times, they loved blood. In the Islamic time, they didn't, but it just gives you the idea. And then everybody's cheering. Of course, it is the place where they're just turning around. That's where everybody, look at the guy on the right side with his flag, and the guy at the bottom there going like that. The Midan was just like that. It was a great hippodrome. Okay, it was a hippodrome, but a hippodrome, where would the hippodrome come from? That's the thing. Yani, the city of Alexandria, as far as I know, did not have a hippodrome. Where were the other hippodromes found? Well, of course, we have to go back to Samarra. And in Samarra, we had extraordinary race courses, as you can see in the slide. They are circular, but they're not oblong as one knows about hippodromes. Of course, the circular ones are great, but we didn't have a Midan that was circular as this one. So these are extraordinary, of course, but they were not done that way. Ibn Tulun did not follow that was found in Samarra. Maybe there is another hippodrome in Samarra that I do not know about, but this is what I know right now. But the only hippodrome that we had in Egypt was actually in the city of Antinopolis. What is the city of Antinopolis? Today it is behind, it's an archaeological site that is behind the village of Sheikh Abada in Upper Egypt. And the city of Antinopolis was that built by the great Emperor Hadrian in the 2nd century AD. Why did he build it? He built it for his beloved friend, Antinos. And there was a love relationship between Hadrian and Antinos. And area, Hadrian, when he came to visit Egypt, he was greatly in grief. And because of his great sadness, he decided to build the whole city in the name of Antinos and named it Antinopolis. The city was quite flourishing. The most important thing about the city of Antinopolis is that it had the best marble, the best stone in the entire Roman world came to build the city. And that's why nothing of it remains today. Because of the good quality of stone, it was used to build other buildings later on. For example, Salah ad-Din ordered every ship passing by Sheikh Abada, Antinos, Antinua, okay, to take at least one block of stone to Cairo to build his citadel. And then we have more stories. Today you go to the place, it's a total. The French went to Antinopolis. Antinoa it was called then, they called it Antinoa, and they recorded that city. Okay, and Jomar, the great topographer, Jomar, built that and surveyed the city. And in the map that he drew, we have a hippodrome that you can see up above, and this is still there until today. This is a satellite, well, it's a Google Earth shot of Antinopolis and Sheikh Abada, and the hippodrome is up there. You can see it very clearly. Measurements of which are 307 meters times 77. And there are other hippodromes in neighboring countries. In Jordan, there is the site of Jarash, the fantastic site of Jarash. And in Jarash, we had a hippodrome there. Okay, stacked, repeating the chariot racing and all of that. Jordan, very nice. Okay, and this measures 245 meters times 53. Then, of course, we have that wonderful one in Constantinople, which known as Istanbul later on the right side of the Sultan Ahmed and the Hagia Sophia with the obelisk in the middle. Okay, that measures 450 meters times 130. We have to add more, and that is west of Egypt. There is Libya, and in Libya has some of the most wonderful Roman ruins in the world, probably after Rome, but they need to be excavated. They're totally ignored and mishandled and in very, very bad state. This is the site of Leptis Magna, Libda in Arabic. And this has an amphitheater, and has next to the amphitheater, it has this huge hippodrome that you see on the coast of the beach, okay, which measures 450 meters times 100 meters. And then the Circus Maximus, which is the most famous of all in Rome, 600 times 120. And this is how reconstruction of it looks. Probably our Midan would have looked like that. And then the greatest of all, the hippodromes, open is that of the Midani Shah in Isfahan in Iran, which measures 560 meters times 160 meters wide. Why am I showing any of that? Because we want to compare. We want to compare hippodromes one from the other. Antinopolis is 307 times 77. Jarash is 245 times 53. Istanbul is 450 times 130. Leptis Magna is 450 times 100. Circus in Rome is 600 meters times 120. Excuse me. 560 times 160. Midan of al-Qata'i in Egypt is between 600 and 650 meters north-south. 170 meters right. Compare the figures, the sizes of these drones. Excuse me? You had to look at them? It would have been one of the largest in the world. One of the largest rather than the largest. The largest maybe is a little bit exaggerating, but it was one of the largest in the world in that of al-Qata'i. Relative to what Maqrizi told us in his description, that the Midan of Ibn Tulun corresponded to the Qara Midan that was below the citadel, which still you can see on this map today. The shape of the hippodrome. In the old earlier study, the shape of the hippodrome would have been oblong, and on both sides, on both ends, it was circular. When you look at the hippodromes that I just showed, one could be curved, and the other side is rectangular. So there must have been something wrong with this map. In the new outline of the city of al-Qata'i, if you look at the open parade ground on the right side, you would see that it is oblong, but then there is a wall, rectangular wall around it, because it had these gates that I'm going to talk about after that. So it would have been something like that. We left the ends kind of vague for later on we can think about how they looked. The gates are very interesting. Why are the gates interesting? Because we had a gate called the Bab al-Midan. Obviously, it was called the Bab al-Midan because it was the gate where people would simply go into the Midan. It was also called the Bab al-Sawalija, which means the Bab of the polo mallets, which means that people who were playing polo games would enter through that. Then we have the Bab al-Khassa. Bab al-Khassa are the bodyguards. What are the bodyguards? The bodyguards of Ibn Tulun. They are part of his entourage. Okay, so they would enter, obviously, from the side of the palace, not from the side of the city. And there was Bab al-Haram. Bab al-Haram was definitely close to the palace of the Harim, women's quarters. Would have been had to be also on the side of the palace rather than the side of the city. And then there was Bab al-Jabal. What is Bab al-Jabal? It is the Jabal, meaning the Muqattam hills, the Jabal al-Muqattam. So it also had to be on the eastern side, next to the palace. Then we had other gates like Bab al-Daramun. Name of the gatekeeper was called al-Daramun. Bab al-Saj, because it had a huge teak wood gate. Saj. And then we have al-Salah or Bab al-Siba. Now, one would think that these gates were not scattered haphazardly, but some of them were on the east side and some of them were on the west side. And this is what we came up with. Bab al-Maidan, Khassa, Haram, and Jabal would be on the side of the palace, whereas the others would had the name of the gatekeepers was on the side of the city. And this is how this would have worked, as you can see. Bab al-Salah, Bab al-Siba, having the same name. This was a bab that was triple. Maqrizi says it was ثلاثة أبواب. ثلاثة أبواب is 3 gates. Shukran. So we have that, very, very nice. And we have a very nice description that this was the 3-gated bab. It's not going to be a bab anymore. It's not going to be a gate. No. It's going to be a huge gate. It's going to be the gate where Ibn Tulun would enter through every Friday, would walk through on his own, through the central arched gate, and then the army would parade on the lateral sides, on the right and the left opening, through all the way to the mosque where he was going to pray. Ibn Tulun started show business. He started the ceremonials of going to the mosque. You just don't go to the mosque and pray. You go to the mosque to show off the splendor, the wealth of the city and the regime that you're living in. And this was Bab al-Salah, but it was also called Bab al-Siba'. Why Bab al-Siba'? Made of. So we have this Bab al-Salah for prayer, because he has to go through it on Fridays. Bab al-Siba', Saba is lion, al-Siba' is lions, because it was decorated with lions. Sphinxes? Who knows? We will never know. But how did they look like? We don't know exactly, except that it was a triple gate. But where did the idea come from? Again, the city of Alexandria did not have a triumphal arch, or did not have a triumphal arch, does not have a triumphal arch, probably at that time. So where did this idea come from? It came from Antinopolis, the city of Hadrian, built by his friend Antinos. Though the French came in the 19th century, in the 18th century, they recorded Antinopolis, as I showed you the map earlier, and then there was this wonderful triumphal arch still existing there, and with a pediment, with a triple arch and all of that, very fine. Maybe Ibn Tulun went to Antinopolis, we don't know. Maybe Ibn Tulun heard of Antinopolis, maybe. We don't know. But then we have another idea, maybe it was Bab al-Amma in the Jawsak al-Khaqani, in Samarra, triple gate as well. Maybe yes, maybe no. But then in the end, also in Jordan, we had, as soon as you enter Jarash, you have this wonderful triumphal arch, which was built by Hadrian, okay, just behind or next to the Hippodrome, 2nd century AD. And then the Palace of Mishatta in Jordan, which is the Umayyad Palace, had a triple arch at the palace, were huge. But you notice that there are huge rosettes up there on the stone. And these rosettes, our Bab al-Salah were decorated with lions. How were the lions put there? Just very hard to understand. It's very hard to grasp the idea of the lions. Okay, so we have to go and think more. Maybe it was something like the lion gargoyles that we find in the temples in Upper Egypt, like here. We have in the Temple of Dendera in the 1st century BC. Everybody goes and sees the figure of Cleopatra on the left there. Well, you look at the gargoyles, they are huge. They are, in relief. And these are water gargoyles that we didn't need to build in Dendera in Upper Egypt. It doesn't rain there, but it was like a checklist that they had to do them. Anyway, it's a lion there. Maybe they will look like that, maybe not, we don't know, but this is a similarity. Maybe yes, maybe no. So we have the Bab al-Salah, and next to it, on the left there, we have the cemetery, the royal cemetery of Tulun. And it would have, the closest that we can get to was the Qubbat al-Sulaybiyah in Samarra, that would have looked like this, domical building. Therefore, it could have been done this way in al-Qata'i, next to the Hippodrome. Also, we don't know how this looked, but we can guess. So from the Bab al-Triumphal Arch of Bab al-Salah or Bab al-Siba' was the main street that went all the way to the Mosque of Tulun. And that is the Ceremonial Street, which is called the Shari' al-Azam. Shari' al-Azam, what does that mean? It's the greatest street. It is not the great street, it is al-Azam, the greatest. And according to the topographers, we know that this street was not a straight street like Greek and Roman streets. It's not a Greek city. It was mu'arraj. It was yu'arraj. It was zigzagging all the way to the Dar al-Imara and the Mosque of Ibn Tulun. And where was that? If we have this map here, we have the mosque there. It was something that didn't come to mind before. After revisiting the city of al-Qata'i, we could walk from the mosque of Ibn Tulun, from behind the mosque of Ibn Tulun, where the Dar al-Imara, the official building of administering Egypt, was located, we can walk along the street that would lead to the open parade ground, which is where the Qaramidan was located. And this street, if you walk along, you get to a point. And that is what we have here. We go to the detailed map from the Description d'Egypte, and let's compare it with others. Now, I'd like to mention just one thing before I go into that, and that is the fact that the streets in Islamic Cairo do not change. They do not change because there are Waqf document rules, changes in the layout of the street, right, left, because of the property laws. And we know that from Fatimid times, Mamluk times, until now, the streets are still there. They are the same. So let's go through that fast. 1809 is that of the Description de l'Egypte. What I'm going to do is on the left side is the map of the Description, and then the right side is the later maps in 1874. Look at the street behind, that long street that leads all the way to the Midan. Here it's called Place Muhammad Ali. Same street there. 1904, same. It's the same layout. In 1915, compared to the Description, it's the same street. Now it's called, it's what? Shara Darb al-Husr. Husr means the mats from Hasira. So plural of Hasira is Husr. And this is the street. Still 1920. Still, you can see it more now. Okay. And today, it is there. It is with the same name. And from this, Shara al-Azam is in fact the street that is known today as the Darb al-Husr. Conclusion, therefore, the Shara al-Husr can be considered as the oldest street in Islamic Cairo. Going back to the Bab as-Salah, it had to correspond to the Shara al-Azam. And when you have the earlier study done on al-Qata'i, it was in the middle of the Midan. Now it had to follow the al-Husr from the mosque to Midan, and this is what we have here. There is a change from this one to that one. Look at the triumphal arch, it has changed, and it had to follow the street of Shara al-Husr, which is the Shara al-Azam today. And now we have the full picture in front of us of the city of al-Qata'i. The main building, the only building that survived, was the Mosque of Ibn Tulun that you all know about, most celebrated building, one of the oldest in the world. And this is the look how it was the original city, four sites. Then after that we had a ziyada that was added, and then after that we had a minaret that was added, not the minaret that is there today, but another minaret that looked very much like that of Samarra. And we had a fawara built in the middle of the mosque, not that you see today, but an earlier one that was octagonal on top of columns, etc. And then we had a building called Khizanat al-Sharab, which was actually a clinic. It's like a pharmacy with liquids for anybody who might have fell or had to have first aid treatment there. And then we had the Meda, where you go and you perform the ablution. And then behind it was the Dar al-Imara, which was the main office of the administration of Egypt, which had to have an open court and then surrounded walls. And this is where Ibn Tulun would come through, inspect the works, and then would enter from the Qibla wall into the mosque to pray every Friday. And this is the plan of the original mosque of Ibn Tulun that is not there today. But generally, the layout is still there. On the upper left, there is a small building known as the Tomb of Sidi Harun. Excuse me, that is a building that was there before the Mosque of Ibn Tulun was. It had some legends related to that it was the brother of Prophet Moses was buried there, but actually it's not. It was a building that had another story later on. We can discuss it. I'm sorry. Okay, so we have a general 3D plan done by Arkinos Architecture in Cairo. And we have this wonderful layout of the mosque, how it looked with its original minaret, with its fawara, Dar al-Imara, it's around, and the little tomb of Sidi Harun there. This is from one side, and this is from the other side, where you can see the little buildings of the Khazanat al-Sharab and the Mida for symmetry. We put them on both sides of the minaret, and this is how it would have looked. This is all nice. Then Ibn Tulun died. Excuse me, I'll take a few minutes and I'll tell you about what happened after that. Ibn Tulun died, and he was succeeded by his son, Khumarawiya. And Khumarawiya was that guy who just loved luxury. He was a man who simply showed the ultimate degree of extraordinary, exotic life. He converted the Maidan, which is the open parade ground or the Hippodrome of his father. He converted it into a bustan, into a garden and a zoo. But then built another Maidan somewhere else that is said to have been larger, bigger than that of his father. We don't know where that was located, but usually from looking at maps and aerial photos and satellite photos now, we usually find traces of the urban fabric of cities, of ancient cities in the past. Here in Cairo, we don't have any of that we can think about. Where was the Maidan of Khumarawiya? We don't know. It was somewhere, but we don't know. Unlike, for example, a city like Lucca in Italy, where we have a hippodrome, there it is, circus, but we can see the perimeter of the hippodrome or the circus of Lucca, all built up by buildings, but without Khumarawiya, we don't know. Anyway, Khumarawiya was Greek. He built interesting stuff in his palace, and I'm going to stay a few minutes now just describing that. He built a great bustan, and this great bustan, he planted wonderful trees where he got them from all over the world. The trunks of these trees were covered with sheets of gilded copper, which were lined with lead water pipes. And every tree was not only but a pretty fountain running through the shady gardens. It had exotic fruits, and it had pigeon houses and wonderful. So it was a beautiful garden. We didn't have a beautiful garden. Then we had a zoo. He had a zoo with exotic animals that were brought from all over. And we know that Khumarawiyya was a great politician. He was weak, but he was a great politician, means that he never trusted anybody. By his own bodyguard was his own lion pet, whose name was Zurek, because it had blue eyes. And Khumarawiyya loved this animal. When he took it everywhere, but when he went to Damascus, he couldn't take it with him, and he was killed over there in Syria. I'm not sure if it's Damascus or Aleppo, but he was killed there, and he didn't have the lion pet with him. But in the zoo there were lions, there were cheetahs, and there was the Beit al-Asad. And they all had a certain great arrangement in opening the gates and closing them and feeding and feeding the animals and all of that. That was very, very sophisticated, and nothing that we could know about or hear about before. So this was the Beit al-Asad, which is the house of lions. The only reference that we have to giraffes, that was in the tomb of Remah in the 15th century BC. We have giraffes, we have elephants, we have anteaters, we have cheetahs, and we have baboons, and all this is very much from like the world of Khumarawiyya. But Khumarawiyya also had, well, this is just for fun, for our guide, my colleagues, guides know all about that. Well, this is a tribute to them. The royal complex of Khumarawiyya had a dome pavilion called al-Dikka. Dikka is a very interesting building. Why was it interesting? Because it had a dome, and it was very beautifully decorated on that side. Okay, and Dikka means a platform or something, but probably maybe because it was high up, it was called that. But then Khumarawiyya also had another pavilion in his palace complex, and this was called Beit al-Dahab, the house of gold. Beit al-Dahab was very, very exotic. It had a dome that was gilded gold from the outside, and from the inside it had paintings of the zodiac, and paintings, great life-size paintings and statues of Khumarawiyya himself, and dancers and all sorts of things. Khumarawiyya had back problems, and in his therapy, he had to lie down on something soft. So in the Beit al-Dahab, Khumarawiyya built a pool that was on outdoors, and this pool was filled up with mercury, quicksilver, or zibak in Arabic, where he had an air-blown mattress was put on, floated, he lied there, and this was tied to silver and gold faucets on the sides of the pool. And in order for him to sleep gradually and smoothly, he would have his dancers, not dancers, but he had his musicians play him music and sing until he would fall asleep every night. Maqrizi says that when moonlight shined on his pool of mercury. Its reflection gave the most admirable effect. Something like this.
Wow, thank you very much, Professor Tarek. This is really interesting and intriguing, to be honest with you. Lots of ideas, and I always wondered how al-Qata'i would look like. So thank you very much again.
Thank you.
We
Are
received.
you it now? Do I have any control? Or
Yes.
you are in control? You are in control.
We will move now to the question and answers. So basically, Dr. Remah can check the questions and yes, thank you.
Apparently, we received plenty of questions, so I tried to put some together, and some are straightforward. So I'm going to start with the straightforward ones. We have Omar from Mauritius. He had a question regarding the early part of the presentation. The strategic position of the Darmistan of the city near a lake and a hill. Can we deduce that those natural features played a psychological role for the betterment of the patients of the hospital?
Probably. We know the location of the Bimaristan because it was given to us by Balawi and Makrizi, I think Ibn Tukmak as well. And I think by having this location overlooking a lake and then agriculture and this view of the Nile added to the beauty of the scene altogether. It's a very relaxing scene. If you had a villa there, it would have been fantastic. Yeah, probably. Thank you, because this is an idea that I never thought of before, but it's a nice idea.
Another question related to the Karamidan. Was it a place for the society to meet and gather, or was it exclusive for the ruling family or the ruling regime? Yeah, go ahead.
What is unusual about the city of al-Qata'i is that it was built for the people. It was not built for the royal. Yeah. The royal complex was royal complex, yes, and people could see the royal complex from far, the palaces and all. Some could enter, some could not, but that's another thing. But are we okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, because okay. I'm sorry. So but all the buildings were public. All the buildings were public. And especially the public views. And then they had the entertainments all the time, and people were going every week to watch the racing and all the tournaments that were taking place. It was a great place for entertainment that Ibn Tulun used to enjoy as well.
Wonderful. Another question, and that's, do you think that the citadel walls were built on top of the remains of the palace? Because they're really adjacent.
Definitely. No doubt. They're built on top of the earlier. And if you excavate there, like, there's the area, there's the part of Bab al-Azab, behind Bab al-Azab, where there are British barracks there built.
Yes.
They thought were ancient, and they were built in the 1920s and 30s. If you demolish these and dig under them, you'll find the remains of the palace of Ibn Tulun. I'm 100% sure. 100% sure.
Okay, this is something that we need to look into.
محمد اسمه سليم the foundation. اوكي يعني لغايه يعني مش لازم يعني maybe يعني لغايه الليفل بتاع the level of the foundation, but not all the way down. So if you dig, you're sure you're going to find things there. 100%.
Very interesting. We have another question from our friend Iman. Did Ibn Tulun move from the palace to the city or from the mosque to Dar al-Imara, and going back and forth? Did he had to walk through the Hippodrome to reach to Bab al-Siba', then al-Azam Street? He thinks that this is a little bit strange, so he had to move into these areas to get to the office or to the mosque, and then going back and forth every day.
They don't say, but I would expect that he was walking from, you see, the entrance, good question. The entrance of the palace was not from the Medan, actually. It was from either the north or from the south, because of security and all of that. So we don't know really where the entrance of the palace was. So, but he started the procession, the ceremony, the process itself, the procession, I'm sorry. He started it from Bab al-Salah and Bab al-Siba', okay? And he was walking. It doesn't say that he was riding, but walking all the way to, because when you walk, it's more showing off.
What about the design of the gardens of the Hippodrome? Was it same as what we observe in Spain and what is known as like the Islamic gardens, being checkered design or square designed, or they don't mention?
We have no idea. We have no idea. We don't know. There's a lot of things we don't know. This is on imagination. You get that, you start to think about it, and then you start to work something out. Maybe more study that's going to be done where we can deduce other ideas. But when you start to think of something, you think of logistics. Like your question of how did he walk from here to there? These logistics are very interesting because it can just bring out more. Where were the bodyguards? Okay, who was walking with Ibn Tulun? Who was the closest guys to Ibn Tulun who could walk with him? How did he move from the location of the palace? Maybe the location of the palace was not on the in the center of the palace area. Maybe it was on the side of the palace area, and the harem were on the other side, or a secluded area. And they start to think of protocols and things that it's interesting.
Do you think excavations in this area would reveal more information? Excavations, but it's mostly current. These areas are now have its own fabric and like houses and so on.
The Medan. No, the Qara Medan.
No, not the Qara Medan.
No. The Qara Medan is still there today. But it will be very hard because it's urban. It's part of the urban fabric. But the parts that are next to the citadel, if you dig down, I'm sure you're going to find something very interesting.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Tarek, for this interesting lecture. I'm sure that we learned a lot, and I will take an advantage of your lecture and go and visit this area again. Maybe I'll have different views now.
Yalla, we go together, inshallah.
This would be great. Thank you. Thank you again. And I would like to thank all our attendees, and I hope to see you again and in our next public lecture. Stay safe and well, and have a great day or night. Depends where are you exactly. Thank you very much. Bye.
Okay. Goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody, for this very, very constructive, very interesting lecture. If there are no more questions coming from our esteemed attendees, perhaps any closing remarks from your side, Dr. Tarek, before we conclude, and then we can close.
Yeah, well, Unfortunately, the city of al-Qata'i is not there, and we should use some of the work done. Maybe it's correct, maybe it's incorrect, but we can use it to apply that method in other fields of study, in Islamic art and architecture, and urban design, and we can really work out something. And the most important thing is that we have to save it. We have to save whatever is there. And saving, you start saving, having proper archives and proper documents that you can go back and refer to, because without these records, we would have not known anything that was about the city of al-Qata'i at all. So this was a great city of splendor and glory, and we can always look back at it and give it a good salute, because I think it was very glamorous myself. But thank you all for it.
Also give you a big salute, Dr. Tarek, for this amazing lecture.
Thank you.
It's been indeed a true interesting lecture. Looking forward, of course, for the upcoming webinars soon, inshallah. If this is it from your side, from Dr. Remah, so perhaps we can close the event now.
Yes. Thank you very much. There's no more questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. And thank you, Dr. Remah. Thank you, Mr. Izzeddin. Thank you, Madam Suzanne. And thank you all for attending. I look forward to seeing you again, inshallah, next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.